afternoon. This is Howard Wiig, Code Green ThinkTech Hawaii. I have as my guest this afternoon Ms. Katrina Morgan. She is principal of Fermata Consulting and an architect and a certified sustainable building advisor. And just by the by, one of the greenest architects in the entire United States of America. She's headquartered in Seattle, but she spends a lot of time down here. As we will see, we're very, very fortunate to have her with us as our guest. And we're going to go through some of the greenest buildings that you could possibly imagine. Katrina, why don't we start with the Bullitt Center, and maybe you could explain, give us a little bit of background.
Well, thanks for having me, Howard. This is very exciting. If you haven't heard of the Bullitt Center, anybody who's interested in green buildings should really look it up and find the information that is available on site, on websites about the project. It's one of the first living building projects, living building challenge projects. The living building challenge is like LEED on steroids. It takes all of the efforts of LEED to minimize energy use, minimize water use, improve air quality, and it says minimize it completely. Harvest all of your water on site, harvest all of your power on site, use no toxic chemicals, not fewer toxic chemicals, etc. So it's a very aggressive challenge, and it's also based on performance of the building, the actual measured performance, and not just modeled performance from a design phase. So the Bullitt Center is complete and occupied as of about April, and they're still in the process of going through their performance period to prove that they're performing as well as they had designed.
And let me intervene and say that when we're looking at these super low energy buildings, we're not just looking at the energy performance, we're looking about the well-being of the human beings who occupy those buildings.
Absolutely. Our office happens to be located in the Bullitt Center. I have to be clear, I did not work on the design team for the Bullitt Center. Our office is located on the 4th floor suite there, so we've gotten to experience the difference between a typical commercial office building and a living building. And I have to tell you that the biggest, like as you're saying, the biggest difference is, to me, it's air quality. I'm someone who's obsessed with being able to breathe freely in a building and to be able to see outside and have fresh air. And the Bullitt Center is really offering that, and it happens to use less energy and water too. So.
Well, most of us know that when you look at an office building's total expense, about 90% is in the expense of the employees, their salary.
That's right.
And every time you have a sick employee, somebody who's not feeling well and so forth, the profitability of that building goes down. So if a employer knows that his employees are being in a very healthy environment, this adds value to the building.
Absolutely, and I'll have to say we are a small growing company, and just being in that office attracts talent that I maybe wouldn't be able to attract otherwise. So they're really enjoying the idea of working in the Bullitt Center. So, and all of our clients like to come and check it out and see all the features.
Well, where should we start? Should we start with some images?
So I thought we'd look at a few just samples. There are so many images available, so we picked a smattering of things. They're touting this building as the most advanced commercial green building in the world. If we look at, let's see, what's on the screen now, that's my office, actually. That's our space. So you see the high ceilings and the windows that there's a type of window that is automatically operated by, it's not an awning or a hopper window. It goes directly out. It goes like 4 inches out from the face of the building, automatically on actuators. Does that when there's too much CO2 in the space, and so it just automatically goes, and we try to sing along with it when it comes open. So it feels like the building is alive, and it responds to the conditions inside and outside.
So it's sort of like breathing.
It's a lot like breathing, and it feels that way, and it's fun, and it feels good, and we get a lot more fresh air that way. That also allows the air to come in through the whole window and not just down low. You'll see on the screen now, this is the irresistible stair. So instead of they chose some of the best real estate in the building, a major corner of the building with a really great view, and they built this beautiful stairway out of beautiful local wood, and it's the place that people want to walk up the stairs. They're much more likely to walk up these stairs than they are to take the elevator. So it's about human health. And there are other features about the building that are they really focus on human health. Next picture is the bike lounge. That's what I call the bike lounge. These are all of our parking spaces. So you'll notice we don't have any car parking. That's one of the tenets of the Living Building Challenge, is car-free living. So the bike infrastructure has transformed my way of life in the year and a half that I've been working in my office there. So I now ride my bike to work at least half of the time. And the infrastructure's there for me. There's tools there that we can use. There's showers. It's just incredibly conducive. And it's discouraging the use of cars. You'll see here, this is a view from the rooftop. You notice in the initial image that the entire roof and out beyond the boundary of the footprint of the building is all one giant, I think it's a 488 kW PV system. And so the whole building was designed based on that. The energy budget was done first, and the building was designed to match that. So this is just an example of what that looks like. It also happens to harvest water from that roof material too. So this is a shot of the radiant in-floor heating system. We'll look at another example of a Hawaii project that's using a radiant in-floor cooling system. So, you know, these strategies are translating from one region to another. Radiant systems just have, there's more first cost, but they tend to have higher comfort level than most any other system and for much less energy use. See, I think we also have some shots of the rainwater harvesting system, which is a pretty massive scale. And you can come and tour the building and see these systems in action, which is really kind of a special, and you see all the degrees of filtration in this picture.
So this would actually translate into potable water, drinkable water, or is it just landscaping?
I'm not sure that it's potable yet. I know that's the intention of some of the Living Buildings projects right now. I did not work on this project, and I'm not sure if they're using it for potable yet. But they are using it to flush toilets and irrigate and managing stormwater on site. So this is an example. We have composting toilets in this commercial office building. So that's a pretty aggressive move, right? These are the digesters that are in the basement of the building. So you can go down and see how they work. And it looks very clean. It smells very nice. It's harmless.
The end product can be used as fertilizer.
That's right. It's a revenue stream in the end. So let's see, what else do we have here? I think we went through all the pictures.
Okay, sure. Oh, here's one more.
Oh yeah, this is another example of they wanted to make all of the techniques used in the building very transparent and visible. So this is a shot from the basement where you can see the radiant floor piping, the rainwater harvesting piping, and where everything comes together. So.
And did the designers of this building face any barriers?
Oh, a few.
Yes.
Yeah, they sure did. I like one of the stories of this building was designed by Miller Hull Architects, and Point 32 was the developer and project management company. It's a fellow named Joe David from Point 32 who did a lot of the work on the Living Building Challenge aspect. And he tells a story when he speaks about the building about one of the membrane materials on the exterior of the building. And the red list, I don't know if I mentioned yet what the red list is, but there are over 300 chemicals that the Living Building Challenge absolutely does not allow in a living building project. And so these are all the things that we see in all of our building products. So it's very difficult to rule them out. One of the things that had to happen was Joe David had to get on the phone with contractors and suppliers and ask them what's in their products, which is not very easy to get answers for. So it also requires transparency. So this particular building product didn't meet the requirements. So Joe worked with them to figure out why they had those products in their materials, and it was mostly out of habit. You know, there's no reason to change that. They reformulated the material and came up with a new material that met the requirement, and they found that it performed better so far, and that was a real success story. So he did that with many, many, many products, and that's one of the things that's happening with the Living Building Challenge, is it's pushing these kinds of changes.
Yeah, we call it market transformation.
It is market transformation.
You introduce new products in a very small way, and then they catch on.
That's absolutely right, right. And so it's providing this impetus to do that. And it's a big, high-profile project, so contractors and suppliers have some incentive to get involved and to be supportive. And there's a list available of the ones that were supportive and the ones that were not. So, you know, if anybody needs to know what that is, I'll show them where the list is. A couple of other interesting anecdotes about how the process went. So the process of doing a building this green is different than the process of doing a standard issue conventional building. So, like I said, the conversations about how much energy budget we had to work with and water budget, et cetera, that was the first conversation, not deep into the design development stage. So there were many workshops. Everybody was at the table. Dennis Hayes, who's the leader of the Bullitt Foundation, which is a environmental philanthropy organization, he made the statement that everybody on this team has to be nice. They have to be able to work together. They have to be able to be communicative, and I think that really led to a lot of easier decision making. Everybody's taking some risk when they go into a project like this. So he fostered a communication style that allowed people to take that risk and not feel like that was too much. Another notable thing about Living Building Challenge is it starts with imperatives. So instead of prerequisites and credits, it basically says you have to do all these net zero things. It also says you have to address social equity. You have to address beauty, things like that, things that are less tangible and harder to put a finger on. But I think that also contributes to the conversation in a way that comes out with something that is much more lasting.
Okay, why don't we move into some of your Hawaii projects then?
Sure. Actually, before we do that, if you don't mind,
sure.
It's most important to state that the Living Building Challenge for Bullitt Center was the biggest success story was in all the code barriers that they went through, that they worked through. So one great example is you saw in the beginning image that the overhang to have the size of PV panel that they wanted on the roof, it had to be quite a bit bigger than the footprint. So my understanding is that now the Bullitt Center essentially leases airspace from the city of Seattle to allow for that awning to be as deep as it is without breaking any code violations. So one by one, the water barriers, the Department of Health and rainwater harvesting barriers, and all of the composting toilets, each of those required a process of involving the utilities, involving the jurisdictions that were affected by those. So that paves the way for other buildings to go down those roads.
Well, let's see it paving the way in Honolulu, because I happen to be an energy codes guy.
Exactly.
And I'm dealing with the issue of I'm promoting large overhangs.
Right.
And I'm getting some grief from that.
Okay.
And then we're really trying to get gray water permitted here. And we're having issues with the powers that be. So.
Yeah. Have you invited folks from the Washington region and the Oregon region for that, from the utilities? Because I think those two areas especially have really dealt with those issues, and I would say get them over here. It's not hard to get them to come to Hawaii, it turns out.
Especially in the winter. I'll invite them to our January.
Right.
Well, on that cheery note, it is time to take a break. ThinkTech Hawaii Code Green with Katrina Morgan.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jay Fidel. That's Ted Ralston. You know, Ted is the host of Where the Road Leads. It shows every Friday from 4 to 5 p.m. It's about technology. It's about how people collaborating and solve problems with modern technology. It's where the road leads. We all know that. We should all be listening. Join us there, 4 to 5 p.m. every Friday. Now, what about that do you agree with?
All of it.
I knew he'd say that. Aloha. Say aloha.
Aloha.
Good.
Good afternoon again. Code Green, Hawaii from ThinkTech Hawaii. My guest this afternoon, Katrina Morgan with Fermata Consulting out of Seattle, and she's done a whole heck of a lot of Hawaii projects. We're very fortunate to have her on the Hawaii team. Why don't you lead off with some examples of what you've done?
I picked a few projects some that we've worked on and some that we haven't, just to show the spectrum of deep green projects happening in Hawaii. Going in the same vein as the Bullitt Center that we started with, I picked Hawaii Prep Academy, which I did not work on. That's of course on the Big Island, and it's a Living Building Challenge project, one of the first ever certified. I also picked the Bear Tree School, which is one that's in Seattle, also not one of our projects, but we're very close to the teams that have worked on that, also a Living Building Challenge project. And then a couple of Hawaii projects that we did work on, Molokai High School, which is using the Hawaii Collaborative for High Performance Schools, the High Chips program, and then WEA, the West Hawaii Explorations Academy, which is, it used LEED as a template, but I don't believe they're going to certify. So those are just a few examples of different ways to go about using green building programs to improve the green building bottom line. And
what are we looking at here now?
So this is the Hawaii Prep Academy. I would think most people in Hawaii will have heard of this one by now. This building took advantage of site geometry very nicely, right? They took into consideration the trade winds, the best solar orientation for PV panels. If we look at slide number 13, really tall teaching spaces, radiant cooling system, which is a little bit experimental. There are 480 sensors in this building that are testing all of the different characteristics, CO2, temperature, humidity, et cetera, which is helping them to manage the space.
So this is a pilot project then? It's
yes,
just
it's very much a
monitored the
pilot.
holy heck out of it.
Yeah, they monitored the holy heck out of it. And, and what that does for projects in the future is that it helps them to understand how these strategies are working. But when it comes down to it, it's really just a very simple building that's minimizing its impact with energy and water to the extent possible with natural means, and then it backfills energy with PV panels and harvested water. So I think, and this is an example of superb views to the volcano and good glare control with the sliding panels. Subtle moves that are very effective at making classroom spaces very usable.
And I should mention, for those not familiar with Hawaii Prep Academy, it's up in Waimea on the Big Island. It's about 2,400 feet up. So the architecture is taking advantage of that nice, cool, very, very mild climate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think there are, in terms of removing barriers, those were just a few examples of the technologies used. But I think what's interesting about Hawaii Prep is they had one primary financier, so they had a benefactor. And same thing was essentially true with the Bullitt Foundation. It's funded by a number of sources, but the benefactor of the Bullitt Foundation and the benefactor that was for Hawaii Prep Academy, they drove the decisions. So it wasn't the design teams trying to push the owners to think about some greener options. It was the owners driving, and the money was driving that. So some people would look at these projects and say these look like pretty high budget projects, but in reality, Bullitt was market rate, and I'm not sure what the cost profile is for Hawaii Prep, but somebody has to take those risks first, so that the other projects, the public schools and other lower budget projects, can take cues from what they learned through their efforts.
Okay, and then I think we have a school back in Washington.
Yeah, Berchi School, another Living Building Challenge project. This was a science addition to an existing building. Let's see, yeah, that's what that looks like. And these are, like I said, the beauty petal. Living Building Challenge works with petals, so the beauty petal is really expressed here. These are places that children really want to be. They want to learn in these spaces. They're intrigued. The children were very involved in the design of the Berchi School. They came to the charrettes. Their ideas can be seen in the execution of the details of the project. Let's look at the slide number 17. And look at some rain gardens. There was it's a tight site. It's an urban site, so there wasn't much room for stormwater management. But there are rain gardens, and the stormwater is all infiltrated on site, so there's no stormwater detention tank that I'm aware of. Learning gardens for children were used in the design. Slide 18, you can see there's another example of composting toilets. So imagine kids growing up in this environment where they're used to this, and so they're not so alienated by it like they are in the Bullitt Center sometimes when visitors come and say, "You've got what?" so the students, are engaging this process. You see the digesters there. Next slide is the green wall that treats gray water on site through a closed-loop evapotranspiration system. So, this is something that the students interact with and care for and maintain on their own. So,
the gray water starts at the top and then gradually just goes down by gravity and feeds into the vegetation?
That's my understanding, right, right. It's the last stage of treatment of the water.
Is that exterior or interior?
That is interior. That space is interior. So it's a living wall inside the building, which helps to scrub the air and provide oxygen for the space. And it's beautiful and it's engaging.
Yeah, plants generally have a very calming, relaxing influence on people.
Exactly, exactly. And then a couple of more slides. That number 20, I think, shows how well that the space is daylit with balanced light from both sides of the room, which is critical. These are naturally ventilated spaces. We can get away with no air conditioning in Seattle, and sometimes in Hawaii. The other examples from Hawaii you'll see have a similar approach. And then slide 21 shows one of the pieces that the children, their ideas were executed in the building. This is a runnel that is part of the rainwater system and stormwater system. It runs right through the middle of the classroom, and so they can see the water system as it's happening. So.
Wow.
Some of those are pretty neat things.
It really would stimulate the kids' imagination.
Exactly. And they realize that their actions have consequences, and they can be good.
And kids like stimulation. They need stimulation.
Absolutely.
So you're having a very, very diverse environment here.
Yeah. I think every design team should have a few 6-year-olds on their team, because they seem to be much more fresh in their approach to some of these ideas. So. Removing barriers. This is another one that removed code barriers, especially Department of Health. They did try to use potable water for this project, some of that harvested water for drinking water, and I think to date it's still not turned on. So the system is there, it's ready for the Department of Health and the state to catch up with it, and then they can turn it on. So, and the other big thing that this project did was they were among the first to vet the red list and to go through and make their list of what meets the requirements, what does not have those 300 chemicals in it. And again, this is all published and available, so you can go division by division on the Living Building Challenge website and see what they found worked and what didn't. So.
You keep mentioning Living Building Challenge.
Yeah,
you want to give a little background on that?
The Living Building Challenge, that it's the one we started with the Bullitt Center. So. So it's saying net zero water, net zero energy. That's what that one's about. So it's kind of taking LEED many steps further. And LEED's now trying to catch up with that. So.
Okay, any other schools in Hawaii?
Yeah, I thought I'd mention Molokai High School, just to kind of back off the Living Building Challenge, super aggressive green projects, and come back to the ones that are making big strides here in Hawaii as well, without going as far as Living Building. So Molokai High School, this is an example. They're bidding the project now. I think they just selected a contractor. We don't yet know who that is, but this is on, of course, Molokai Island, and this is an example of another great, well ventilated space with no air conditioning, great daylighting, great glare control. Let's see, what other slide do we have? Number 24. Yeah, look at this. This is just the modeled space, but you can see how, again, balanced daylighting, ceiling fans and high ceilings, PV panels. This project also took advantage of the trade winds in a way that some of the Oahu projects maybe can't, because they're blocked. But this example shows how, the smart arrows know exactly where to go, don't they? All the hot air knows to go up to the top, and the ceiling fans help to adjust the micro adjustments as needed. So I just think this is a really great project. This is by CDS International Architects. I provided a list at the end of all the teams. There's so many hundreds of people involved in making these projects happen. So this one, I think, is an important example of, this is one of the first projects to use high chips. High chips is designed, there are CHIPS programs throughout the country. We've used Washington Sustainable Schools in Seattle, and High Chips has come out in the last couple of years to address some of the unique challenges of Hawaii. And so to see these public school projects, not private schools, public schools using these templates, it drives a workshop process that says you have to have at least 4 workshops, you have to have the contractor involved, you have to have the owner involved. It provides a codified way to go about that process so that opportunities aren't missed.
And CHIP stands for?
Collaborative for High Performance Schools. Yeah. And so you can do CHIPS verified or CHIPS designed. So if it's verified, someone from the mainland is monitoring the performance and looking at the documentation to prove that it's meeting the requirement.
And what do we have on our screen right now?
What we have now is the West Hawaii Explorations Academy. This is a Ferrara Choi Architects project on the Big Island as well. It's the first phase of this, just completed construction, which is not all the buildings you see there, but it's the first part of the village. The motto at this school is "No Child Left Inside." And this is a project I worked with Ferrara Choi along with, excuse me, O'Brien and Company, which is another green building consulting firm out of Seattle. And we helped them with that workshop process, again, going back with involving the teachers, involving students, involving community members to make sure that their needs are being met first. If it's not a place for learning, then it's not a green building. If it's not a place that fits into the community, there was a cultural consultant that helped us to fit in there as well. So I think that's what's really happening with these programs, the green building programs. It's helping us to not have certain things fall through the cracks in favor of just having energy savings. You know, we need to have energy savings and healthy environments and wonderful places to learn and work and things like that. So it helps us to not miss important pieces.
You've shown some really good daylighting examples, and study after study shows that if a child is in a very poor environment in a classroom and then is shifted to a well daylit environment with a view, test scores go up by 20%, pretty well across the board.
I would like to get your information on those studies because I hear about that anecdotally and I haven't seen the actual studies, but intuitively it makes a lot of sense. And you know, WEA was an example of a project that didn't go, High Chips I don't think was even available yet when that came out, and so they used Lead for Schools as a template. I don't believe they're going to pursue the certification. That school is, it's a very simple campus. They wanted to be basically glorified tents. What the charter school had before was, you know, tents on the beach, and that was really actually a really rich learning environment. It was about aquatics, and the kids were actively engaged in projects and things like that. So they wanted to upgrade from that, but they didn't want to go to a feeling of a commercial environment that felt too stuffy, right? So LEAD actually was going to have it was going to make that a little difficult by saying, okay, you have to insulate everything to this degree, and you have to model the ASHRAE baseline, et cetera, and that was proving to be a bit of a hindrance to their creativity. So.
Well, on that cheery note, let's take another break and go into our final segment.
Great.
Aloha, hello. My name is Hong Jiang, and I host ThinkTech Asia every Tuesday afternoon at 4 p.m. At our show, we talk about issues that are important in Asia, such as environment, culture, history, religion. We broadcast live, and we're also on Olalo 54. Make sure to tune in, and we'll see you there. Thank you. Goodbye.
Good afternoon again. This is Howard Wiig, Code Green, ThinkTech Hawaii. We're very fortunate to have as our guest this afternoon Katrina Morgan, a certified green architect who divides her time between Seattle and other regions and Hawaii. And we're primarily talking about her Hawaii projects. Any more schools or anything to talk about? Oh, no, how about non-schools?
Yeah, I thought we'd hit a few sectors. We talked about office space, and we talked about schools, and now I'd like to talk about a civic project as well as a neighborhood project. So IAEA Public Library is one, and it recently, just very recently, was anointed with its LEED Gold certification, which exceeded the original goal of silver. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then also the Ward Village Neighborhood Development Project, which is a platinum LEED for Neighborhood project. So, you know, we're kind of hitting on several different green building protocols that are used in different ways and that break down the barriers in different ways. So if we start with slide number 27. So this is a brand new shot of the completed IAEA Public Library. This is a CDS International project as well. You can see there that the roof is covered with a very subtle, low-profile PV array, which I really appreciate, starting to integrate that into the looks of buildings instead of having them feel like such an appendage. So it's really built into the space. And if you look at number 28, So this is very much a community-based project. This was a replacement of a former library that was very small, very stuffy, no parking. And so this was a case where air conditioning was important. So a lot of the design is based on how to minimize the demand for air conditioning and provide comfort inside. And so you see the high ceilings again, and you see exposed ductwork that's delivering excellent air quality to the spaces. But the thing that I find that was really exciting about this project is the community was so excited about having this facility, and the community got behind the green building aspect of it, and I think the folks felt really proud of the LEED Gold status. And I'm very proud of this team for pulling together 19 of the 19 possible energy credits. So that's a really excellent performance to achieve for a building that has air conditioning especially.
Well, what I liked about that initial slide was the big overhangs.
That's right.
Because my studies show that especially in a mild climate like ours, overhangs are all important. I've done measurements where the sun is directly striking a dark surface.
Right.
And that came out recently to 168 degrees.
Right.
And then you go right next door to the same surface that's shaded.
Yep.
You're down to 118 degrees.
Excellent.
A 50-degree drop.
50-degree drop. So you're not working against yourself if you have those overhangs. The other thing is building color. Same is true of building color. So if your cooling load is bigger than your heating load, which is always going to be the case here, and you have dark colored buildings, you're just fighting yourself because those temperature deltas are so big.
Yeah, the Hawaii Building Code rewards people for having cool roofs and even cool walls.
Indeed.
We're the only cool wall code in the entire nation.
A couple of lessons learned on this project. I think, I don't know the status of this today, but I know that there's been a little bit of a struggle getting the PV system turned on. So this is an example of something we're seeing across the whole country. The utility companies today are going to have to look a lot different in 15 years, right? We can't stand in the way of projects that can do the right things within their own site. But of course that affects the bottom line of the utility. So this is a great example of that push and pull. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that gets worked out over time.
Open up almost any edition of our local paper, and you're going to see that push and pull in action.
Right.
Letters to the editor.
Yep.
He did this, she did that, and so forth.
Yeah, and this is what change looks like. And so, you know, if I think the approach that a lot of my clients are taking is if you build it, they will come. Just like Berchi School building in their drinking water system that they can't turn on, and the Bullitt Center turning their building into a utility, essentially, an individual utility, so that they can test their water to show how well they're treating on site with natural means. Those folks are taking the risk on behalf of the rest of us, and that's going to upset the utilities, and sometimes the utilities are going to come up to meet halfway, and some are not. So I found, again, you know, in our region, I find a lot of receptivity to that kind of dialogue, and so you know, I think Oregon and Seattle and Washington are both great examples of places to go to see how they've overcome some of those challenges. Another thing that you know, how did the green building product on the IAL library affect the process of the building? There would never have been the degree of commissioning on that building without the LEED requirement. So that's another case of just a tangible aspect that if it weren't a LEED project, it wouldn't have done these things. If it weren't a LEED project, I wouldn't have had all those conversations with the contractor about where the waste was going. You know, it's tedious, and I find all of these LEED and green building protocols probably more tedious than most people because I deal with them every day. But I have to say that I really think the bottom line is worth it. If we can help people to see that those conversations are meaningful, then we've done our job.
Yeah, I'm again an energy codes guy, and commissioning, that means you get a third party going on site at 3 different stages of the project and making sure that everything is in there that should be in there, and finally that it's working as it's supposed to be working.
Absolutely. And that is something that a difference between Washington and Hawaii. I've seen we have really great commissioning resources in those states, right? And Hawaii has some really good resources, but not enough.
Yeah.
So if anybody is, you know, an 18-year-old and wants to go to college to find a career, be a commissioning agent, because you'll have plenty of work to do in Hawaii.
Yeah.
I'd love to be a commissioning agent. I think that'd be fun.
I'm going to have, my next guest is going to be a residential commissioner.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a high-value product.
So finally, we have something called Ward Village. What in the world is Ward Village?
So you've probably been aware of the Kaka'ako development.
Oh,
It's about 62 acres of land owned and operated and managed by the Howard Hughes Corporation through their organizations. And I'm working on 2 of the first phase towers. There's the Waiea Tower and the 988 Halakawila. But what I really wanted to hit on this project, if you can put up image number 29, this is a project that has employed the Lead for Neighborhood Development protocol. And again, I didn't work on the neighborhood development aspect. I worked on the buildings, the LEED certifications for the buildings. But what's interesting about this is they've already been handed their platinum level neighborhood development. And that may not sound like a very big deal to folks that aren't familiar with LEED or that only work with the buildings, but this is the biggest LEED for neighborhood development in the country. And this is an example of one of those opportunities for Hawaii to leapfrog the mainland in certain ways. You know, for Hawaii to have one of the first living buildings, and for Hawaii to have one of the first LEED Platinum ND building developments, that's you know, that's outstanding. And some of the things, the benefits of LEED ND include things like the developer has to make promises about affordable housing. They have to make promises, and they have to meet the promises.
Yes.
And they have to have all the buildings LEED certified to a certain level. They have to meet certain energy savings and water savings targets. They have to pursue, or at least consider, district cooling options if they're available. It's, you know, there are 100 different credits that are involved in that, and so that sounds again like very subtle, but it's huge, and it will have a meaningful difference in the way that this whole area is developed. If it were developed by a developer that didn't care about those things, I think we'd see a much bigger fight happening with locals that want to see this particular land managed in a really responsible way.
Yeah, we're all familiar with bronze, silver, gold in, say, the Olympics.
Yeah.
And within LEED, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, it's the same principle, but then above gold, and it used to be almost impossible to attain, is the platinum.
That's right.
And this is a huge, huge, huge honor to
It really is.
Yeah.
It's not a trivial amount of effort and expense, and you know, it's also interesting to me that development is quite big physically. It's 62 acres of Honolulu. That's a big chunk of it. And to see that whole area, I think we have another slide, number 31, I believe. Maybe the next. Let's try that one. Yeah. So this is just a sort of a master plan of those 62 acres, and what you notice the most is green. So there are many towers. There are 20 some odd towers, but the footprint of those towers is relatively small, and the green space is maximized to the extent humanly possible, right? And so, you know, this is a way for one developer to yield a product that is cohesive and that meets all these promises and goals in one place, as an example that doesn't exist anywhere else in the country. So I'd like to see this one, you know, really make a difference in how the mainland looks at major developments like this.
And looking at all that green, we locals just experienced what may have been the hottest day of our careers in Hawaii yesterday.
Yeah.
And if you take a urban landscape, say asphalt, and you put a heat gun on it, you're going to get up to 178 degrees.
Absolutely.
You put greenery in that same area, you're going to reduce your temperature by a good solid 70 degrees.
Absolutely.
So this is the way to, even though we're having high rises at the street level, to keep it cool. You need all the greenery you can possibly get.
Yeah, it's true, and that minimizes the air conditioning demand, at least up for the lower level townhouse style buildings and that. And these towers, the air conditioning systems can be much more efficient when you have a tower situation than maybe hundreds of homes versus one tower that has the most efficient possible mechanical systems that you can buy. And one of the requirements of LEED for neighborhood development is that the Ward Village towers have at least the infrastructure in place to connect to deep sea cooling water once that system becomes available, which may or may not happen anytime soon.
Yeah.
But at least when it's there, that whole area will be able to make use of it. So it's going to take that kind of big gestures to make big changes. So.
Yeah, there's all this controversy we see in the papers, but what you're talking about isn't...
Doesn't sound so bad.
Yeah. If I were the Howard Hughes Corporation, I'd be pitching this every time any reporter interviewed me.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I think that, again, most people don't understand what LEED neighborhood development does. So we're out there trying to make that point, and we're actually going on film tomorrow to talk about that very thing. So because we do want people to know that that's where this is headed. There's an assumption that the big bad developer is going to come and make everything worse. But I think this is an infill project that is doing a very good job.
Yeah, some of the initial Kaka'ako meetings that I've been to people have expressed concern that you're just going to have these huge towers, and there's just going to be concrete and asphalt in between those towers.
Right.
And there's not going to be any place to eat, to recreate, anything like that, retail shops. And I think you're indicating that this is going to be a very, very pedestrian-friendly area.
Extremely, and I find most barriers to green building have to do with fear, and so that's an example of there's the fear of something being what you've expected from the past, which makes sense. But I can attest to the nature of this particular development. Unless they change everything before they build the projects, that's not going to be what it looks like. It's very green, it's very pedestrian-friendly, it's very bike infrastructure friendly. There's infrastructure for electric cars. It's like, they've pretty much covered all the bases. So.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're just about to wrap up. Were there any barriers that you encountered?
So I'll note that this, I'm working on 2 of the towers at Ward Village, but not the neighborhood development. That's a company called Ramey & Associates that did the consulting on the neighborhood level. And they would be good to ask for what their barriers were. But I think that the main barrier that I see, because my job is to connect to the neighborhood development part, and it's just a matter of connecting what the developer wants to do, what they've promised to do in the neighborhood development level, and they really want to do those things, and then connecting it to the reality, because it is difficult when it gets down to really saving 40% of the energy in every building, and really, nailing down and trying to pull down the monthly fees for condo owners, et cetera. So it's just a real challenge, mostly financial, when it comes down to it.
The issue of affordable housing, I'm glad you brought that up, because this is just a huge issue for us.
It's a huge
especially
issue,
in the urban core.
Right. Right, and that's a major challenge for the developer too, because they're doing a lot of building and they need to pay for that building. So it's very difficult for them to keep the AMI, the mean income level, meeting the target that's in the neighborhood development's checklist. So that it's all financial. In this case, I think it's all financial. But culturally, this group, the design teams involved, are very sophisticated. And they're all doing their best to keep those promises. And
on that cheery note, we need to wrap up. But if people are interested in getting in contact with you, what should they do?
They should go to www.fermataconsulting.com.
And how do you spell Fermata?
F as in Foxtrot, ERMATA.
.com.
It's the musical notation that means to sustain.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much,
Thanks
Katrina.
for having me.
This is Howard Wiig, ThinkTech Hawaii, Code Green. See you in 2 weeks.